Okay, just one moment. It's got to be here somewhere. Nope, this one. Yeah, it was definitely this one. I must have highlighted it. Okay, that is so not helpful. This book, it was pretty influential in my master's thesis. Unfortunately, I wasted quite a bit of time with that inefficient highlighting and note-taking. Even worse, it's probably never going to be useful to me ever again unless I take the time to reread it. All because I didn't know how to take proper notes. But I do now. Or at least I'm much better at it. Thanks to the help and advice from many, I have created for myself 5 rules for reading. Now, this process isn't for every book. I don't apply it to fiction or books I'm looking to be an archivist in or I'm reading for something in class. Those are different processes that I'll talk about in a later video. This process is mainly for those big idea books, where you're looking to get a core concept and apply it to your life, or to better understand the world around you. So how do I do it? Well, let's grab a book and get started. Now, these rules for reading in such a way that you can take useful highlights so that you don't waste your life later on rereading the same book if you don't need to, actually start before you begin reading. So I'll cheat and call it Rule 0, the reading criteria. Firstly, if I'm going to read a book, it has to come strongly recommended from a personal close friend, or it has to have 2 recommendations from external sources I trust. This is just a way of strongly vetting books so I don't waste my time on something that I may hate. Now, of course, I don't follow this exclusively, but it's a good vetting process. Secondly, and this I recently stole from Chris Do, you have to have a reason of why you're reading the book. Before you even start reading, ask yourself, what is your intention in reading this book? And then provide yourself with 1 to 3 answers or so. So, for instance, this book here, Swiss Watching, why am I reading this book? Well, I hope to someday earn Swiss citizenship. And if I'm going to do that, I need to really understand the Swiss culture and the Swiss history, and so I'm reading a whole bunch of books to try and immerse myself in that so I can be well integrated. Finally, and probably most importantly, remind yourself that you don't have to read every single word in the book. You can skip around, or, worst case scenario, you can toss it to the side if it is terrible or if it just doesn't apply to you. Now, this last one only happened to me literally once, where I threw the book across the room. It deserved it. Now, this is going to sound kind of dumb, but rule 1 is to read. But read with a notebook in one hand and a pen or highlighter in the other. Okay, maybe not literally in one hand and the other, they can just be on hand instead of actually in hand. Now, I didn't always do this. It was actually the Japanese filmmaker Akira Kurosawa who turned me on to this and completely changed my mind about how I read. You see, in his autobiography, he wrote, "My own experiences and the various things I have read remain in my memory and become the basis upon which I create something new. I couldn't do it out of nothing. For this reason, since the time I was a young man, I have always kept a notebook handy when I read a book." He goes on to say that how years later he would go back to these notes and refer to them whenever he was writing his own script for the next movie. And, to really just kick it home, he sums up that entire passage by saying, "So what I want to say is, don't read books while lying down in bed." Like I said, this kind of gave me a kick in the seat of the pants because that's exactly what I was always doing, reading while laying down. What you really want to do is engage in the text and be an active reader, not a passive reader. Highlight text and write down your thoughts in the margins or in a separate notebook. This is crucial. But you wanna know what? If you're watching this video, you probably already do that in spades. I mean, that's why you're here, right? To learn how to take useful highlights and notes and not just be swarmed with an abundance of them. Don't worry, we're getting to that, but before we do, I think we need to talk about what you should highlight. Give me that! You highlight too much. It's become ineffective. Only highlight what resonates with you. I'm talking about that moment when you're reading along and then suddenly there's this brief moment of elation where you think you're on the cusp of understanding what the author is trying to say. Stop. Right there, don't read any further. Don't try to read ahead to figure out what it is and crest that hill. Instead, write down that thought immediately. These are your fleeting notes. Once and only once you've captured those fleeting notes, go back and highlight that portion which triggered the thought. This is rule 2. Highlight what resonates with you. And every highlight must have a corresponding note, explaining why it sparked an interest in you, what you felt. Make that as brief as you can, but in detail enough that you can remember it later. I added this stipulation because I found myself whenever I took a highlight, I'd come back to it a day later and have no idea why it was important to me. I had lost that moment of transcendence. Now onwards to the fun part, and probably the part that you are skipping, because it's hard work. And that's the Zetteling. Okay, I can't speak German, but I have studied enough to know that Zetteling makes no sense whatsoever. But you see, my system is based on what is called the Zettelkasten, which was pioneered by Niklas Luhmann and was later popularized by Sönke Ahrens in his book How to Take Smart Notes. Zettelkasten literally means note box. So Zetteling means noting. Okay, actually, let's hang on there for a moment because that makes actually perfect sense. Because that's what we're about to do. We're about to make the real notes. We're going to be noting. This is rule 3. Develop your fleeting notes into permanent notes. Now, I always follow rule 3 in front of the computer because I use a software application called Roam Research to develop my notes as well as to store them for later use, which is step 4, and we'll get to that later. Now, I absolutely love Roam Research. It's like an outliner but on steroids and is amazing. But you don't need to use it. Niklas Luhmann used to do this on a bunch of index cards. The important bit here is to take those fleeting notes and those highlights and to combine them and to really dig in deep and explore until you really understand the concept and the idea being expressed. I find that this works best for me through writing. Write a couple of paragraphs, a couple of sentences, whatever it takes, dig in deep to really understand the core concept and express it in your own words. This step will take time. If you are interested, I can go into detail on how this step works and why and how I use Roam Research to accomplish it. If so, let me know in the comments down below. But the important bit is that you are able to understand and condense your fleeting thoughts into one core idea, an atomic thought. This is your permanent note. Which brings us to rule 4, make connections. Take that permanent note and connect it to other permanent notes from past books, articles, lectures, whatever. This is where the magic really begins to happen. If my thesis taught me anything, it's that everything in this world is interconnected, and our notes should be the same. Connecting our notes draws out ideas and inspirations which we wouldn't have otherwise seen, and these can be the basis of future articles or blog posts or books or theses or tweets or videos. You get the idea of pretty much anything. But more important than that, making connections between other things that you've already studied and know helps deepen this new idea in your own memory. Once again, I do this in Roam Research, but you don't have to. Luhmann stored all of his index cards in giant boxes and nested hierarchies with references to other cards written on them physically. Use whatever system is most simple and makes the most sense for yourself. But make those connections and store them all in a single location. This becomes your Zettelkasten. Over time, you will develop this web of interconnected ideas and thoughts from all sorts of different domains of life. And more importantly, you'll have already struggled through those notes and have your personal thoughts and references to back up those ideas. And don't forget that making those connections will help you remember the idea better, meaning you're less likely to have to reread the book over again. Unless you want to, which I frequently do, especially The Count of Monte Cristo. Best book of all time, or at least in the top 5. Which leads us to rule 5, and that is the praxis. Do, make, teach something with this new idea and the connections that you've made. This is how you'll come to internalize and deeply understand what you've just learned. Now, the result of all this is that you will probably read fewer books, but hopefully you'll be able to retain what you read and won't have lost it and have to start all over again when a new project comes your way. It's not about the number of books you've read, it's about really internalizing these ideas and understanding them. Now, I touched on a ton in this video and only cursorily at that. If you want to dive deeper into any of these topics, such as other forms of note-taking or Zettelkasten or Roam Research or really anything else, please stick around as I've got plenty of videos in this series that I'm planning on releasing progressively over the coming months. I'll have other videos interspersed to mix things up a bit. But if there's something that you're really interested in hearing me cover, please leave a comment down below so that I can bump it to the top of my list or add it if I hadn't already thought about it. I really hope that this video was helpful and that you will stick around because seeing people view and interact with my video is incredibly rewarding and just gives me a little bit of joy every time I see one of those comments or a like or the view number go up. So, till next time, bye. And that's the Zetteling. And that's the Zetteling. Okay, I'm gonna go with the English. Give me that. You highlight to... Oops. To develop the notes into permanent notes as well as to do the next stage. Let's not do that. Connecting our note. Why can't... This video is killing me. I love it. I love the ideas. It's just a little bit overwhelming. I have no idea why. I think I've been spending way too much time on this. And I should really disable the notifications. But let's go. It's not about the number of books you've read. It's about how deeply you... I'm gonna do that section again.